Lombardi. My company, Lombardi Construction, is located here in Manhattan Beach. My family and I reside in Hermosa, and I've been working for myself here in the Beach Cities for 13 years now. And when I started in 1999, the local community of realtors was probably the primary source of referral for me. So I want to start at least by going on record to say thank you. You guys have been and continue to be a great source of business for us, and we sincerely appreciate it. So thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. My area of expertise is custom building residential properties in the beach cities, primarily Manhattan and Hermosa Beach. And when Dunham asked me to speak with you today, I thought, okay, you know, I can stand here and speak about construction, but what's going to be the most relevant for you? What would you like to hear? So I try to think of this as, I try to imagine what your clients and prospective clients might be asking. How much does construction cost? How long does construction take? What sort of interactions do you have with people with regards to construction? And that's what I'll try to address today. There are 4 specific elements I'd like to cover. One is market characteristics. I'm not sure how we're doing on that.
Andy's phone.
Okay. One is market characteristics. I'll also speak about cost of construction. I'm going to speak about the construction process, specifically what it means to design a piece of property, design a project, go through plan check, build it, how long does that take? And I'm going to touch briefly on some remodel basics. As Jack mentioned, I'll be in your office in Manhattan Beach tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So if any of you have more specific questions or follow-up questions, we can talk further then. As far as market characteristics go, I think the one word that sums up the local construction market is variety. When, you know, in terms of what's available, everything's available. You know, so when somebody asks you how much does it cost to build a new house, the first thing that I try to do is figure out where that person sits on the spectrum of cost and service that's available. Okay, is this person going to expect a home that costs $500 a foot to build, or do they expect a home that costs $200 a foot to build? And I think that's essential in answering the question. What does it cost? Well, what do you want? What do you expect? And in trying to determine that, I think it's important to ask people a few specific things. What are their needs? Why are they thinking about construction? When somebody phones me and says, hey, I've got a set of plans, I'd like you to bid a project, the first thing I ask them is, okay, tell me the history behind the project. And usually when they start talking, they describe a scenario that involves liking their location, maybe having equity in their home, loving their neighbors, looking at what's available, not really loving what they see on the market, especially right now, and deciding that it's better for them to go through the construction process. Sometimes that conversation involves, well, we thought about remodeling, we thought about moving, we thought about building, we entertained everything. So it's all out there, and it's a challenge, I think, to get people talking, and the more they talk, the better you can place them on that spectrum and tailor an answer with regards to construction. Specifically, you know, what's your budget? What do you identify with? I think a big thing that influences our mutual clients is who they know in the neighborhood. Hey, my friends just had so-and-so build us a house, and we love it. It was a successful project for them. You know, the circle that a potential client is exposed to is also a great influence on them. So, you know, in summary, it's kind of like a feng shui conversation. You know, there's no science to this. You do have to go with the flow a little bit. I think you have to get people talking, and to talk more about the specifics of construction, I think you have to learn a little bit more about your audience and your client, and really tailor your responses carefully. As far as the cost of construction goes, I'm going to talk about cost per square foot basis. This is an imperfect formula, but it's kind of the best thing we have to quickly cover construction cost. As far as the new single-family homes that we've built in recent years in the sand section, the majority of them, the average lands in the range of between $300 a foot and $350 a foot. We've built cheaper, we've built more expensive, but that's the average for my clients within the last 5 years. When I say per foot, that means the same square footage number that we put on a property right now, the living space. It does not include the garage, it does not include the decks, the roof deck, and the reason I do it that way is because it's quick and easy. It's one number that everybody can relate to, and it's difficult to assign a cost to a deck or a garage. Some garages are subterranean on an upsloping lot, involve flooring and retaining, it's a six-figure cost just for the garage. Other garages on flat lots are slab on grade with 3 walls and a door. So again, the per foot number isn't perfect, but it's the best thing we've got to give somebody a general expectation of the range. I think in our market there are builders who would tell you they can build you a new house for $250 a foot, and obviously on up. So, but in general, the low 300s is a good benchmark to shoot for sand section, single family. That number doesn't change too much as you move neighborhood to neighborhood. I think the biggest factor that influences it, in addition to what the client wants, is the siting of the project. Does the project have a basement? Is the lot flat? Do you have shoring and retaining? When someone's considering a project in the initial phases and they're cost conscious, the characteristics of the lot right away will influence that number a reasonable amount. As far as what's included in that construction cost, again, my number speaks to everything specific that happens on site, from the initial asbestos survey and pre-demolition work, all the way through to punch list, final cleaning, prep and detail, everything it takes to get somebody moved in. What's not included would be any outside design or consultation fees, architecture, structural engineering, any consulting engineers such as civil or soils, municipal fees, school fees, plan check, furnishings, interior design. Sometimes we include window coverings if they're integrated into the construction, but for the most part, unless they're specifically mentioned on plans, those design elements would not be included in that per foot basis. As far as how reliable that number is, what the risks are in determining cost, in the current market, almost everything we bid is competitively bid. And in general, it's common sense, the more developed a set of plans and specifications is, the more accurate a price I can give. Most often in our market, a set of plans is a template that's good enough to give a general idea of the project characteristics. It's good enough for a client to obtain a building permit, but there's still a good deal of design build that goes into the custom projects that we do. As far as specifying fixtures, finishes, cabinets, the fine details. So in a competitive bid scenario, the one thing I would advise your clients to be cautious of, or at least aware of, is that a bidder is going to bid only what's on the plans. The bidder's going to respond to the documents that they've received. And that doesn't necessarily develop a real working budget for a project. I think there needs to be a conversation that when a contractor is engaged, or as a client's going through the process, there needs to be an awareness of, okay, you're going to get a competitive bid. It's going to give you a market check. It's going to line up the candidates relative to each other, but make sure those bids are carefully evaluated. Do they include permit fees? Do they include architecture? Do they include landscape, hardscape, and softscape? really looking carefully at the numbers can help to de-risk the cost number and to manage clients' expectations. I think those are important steps that people need to take when they're planning a project. As far as timing and the construction process, I like to break this up into 3 phases. The first is design development, followed by plan check and city approval, and lastly construction. And I get calls sometimes from people who say, okay, I'm in escrow on a house, I'm in a 45-day escrow, and we're going to add 1,000 square feet and a second floor, and we want to start the day we close. And I say, okay, well, do you have plans? Who's your architect? Do you have your permits yet? And they say, no, we just want to know how much it's going to cost. And we're just getting started. And at that point, I have to tell them it's going to take 3 months just to go through plan check. Once their plans are developed, and I think being able to manage that timeline expectation is important too. So as far as engaging an architect or a designer developing a set of plans, obviously this timeline will vary hugely. But I think you have to allow at least 4 to 6 weeks for conversations, meetings, and the designer selection, assuming somebody doesn't know who they want to work with at the outset. And then anywhere from 90 to 180 days to develop a set of plans and get ready to go to plan check after that. City plan check in Manhattan Beach, 10 to 12 weeks. Again, that will vary. If you're talking about a kitchen remodel with no structural changes, then no, it's not going to take 12 weeks to get a permit. For a new build, it will take 12, maybe 14 weeks to deal with the final corrections and actually receive approval. So that's an important timeline to consider. As far as the cycle of construction, there's a range. Last year, we built a single-family house, 2 stories on a flat lot in the sand section, 2,900 square feet, 10 months from permit to final. Simultaneously, we finished a house, similar size lot, sand section, full basement, totally custom, took 27 months from permit to final. And that was driven by the specifications of the project and the client needs and the overall culture of the project. So when somebody says, how long is it going to take? Again, I try to feel out what that client's expectation is and what the culture of the job is going to be. Are we going to make samples of every cabinet finish for a site meeting and a final decision, or are we going to receive a binder or a set of plans that says, here's what you built? Do we stop and ask every time we do something, or do we take the plans to the letter and run with it? And that culture, every job has a culture. It's defined by the contractor's system and the client's needs. And that culture is what really determines how long the project takes. It's also important to leave time at the end of the job for certificate of occupancy, gas meter, final detailing. Personally, we don't like to move anybody into a property until it's done. It's not fun for us to have a moving van in the driveway and the gas company running around lighting pilots at the same time. We don't know if the heater works yet. That's not the way we like to do it. So between the final, for example, in Manhattan Beach, between final inspection, the last day the inspector walks on the job, to certificate of occupancy, could take 3 days. Once the certificate of occupancy gets sent to the gas company, that's 5 days for the gas meter, and then we like a couple days to turn everything on, make sure it's working. So it's important to allow for that finishing time to give somebody a comfortable, positive move-in experience rather than a scramble, which it can turn into oftentimes. As far as remodel basics, a couple things to touch on. The best remodel projects that we've had in our history of working here are projects where our clients have a great vision, where they walk us through the house and they narrate. They say, okay, the bathroom's going away, the hallway's going to go through, the addition goes on the back, the stairs go here. They see it and they get it. Those clients usually are the ones who are best suited to a remodel. They understand what it takes, the difference between what they have and what they're wishing for. Defining the scope of work on a remodel project is critical to determining the cost. On one end, there's we just want a kitchen remodel, everything stays untouched, or hey, we need the square footage, we need another room in the back. but the roof stays, the windows stay, the siding stays. On the other end, there's, okay, we want the kitchen and we want the addition, but we want to change the spirit and feel of the overall project. We want new siding, new windows, new flooring, so that substantially the house is new when it's done. Figuring out where somebody lies within that range is critical to determining cost. The question we get all the time is, can we live here during construction? Just tell people no, please. We have had newborn babies in houses that are totally torn apart with plastic barriers where we're running the shop vac twice a day to keep it clean. Ultimately, it depends what the client can tolerate. It's not advised, it depends on the scope of work, but in general, if somebody can afford to move out, can see the benefits of not living in their project while it's under construction, they're going to have a faster cycle and a more positive experience. So obviously I'm biased on that one. We advise people to move out. A big one is, how does remodel cost translate into market value? Earlier was mentioned, what do you get for $500,000? Well, I think in terms of market value, improvement value, lot value, you have to start from the end and work backwards. You have to look at what the neighborhood comps will justify. There's no silver bullet. So, recently my family remodeled our house. It was a tiny house. We added a significant amount of square footage. We pretty much redid everything that was there, and we're about to go through the refinance process. And I know that we're not going to get our improvement cost back because our neighborhood comps don't justify it. We knew that going into it. We did what we needed to do. And I think to answer that question really takes a study on a case-by-case basis. What is the cost of the property initially? Assuming the revised write-up, new kitchen, X square footage, X bedrooms and bathrooms, what's the market going to give you? And that's the answer. Similarly with lot value. Hey, what's lot value? Well, lot value is the market comp minus the cost of construction. And what's left over will tell you if you've got a good deal or not. I think it's as simple as that. So I'd love to take a couple questions. And again, we'll follow up tomorrow. But also, anything you guys can offer in terms of construction costs, market comps that you think would add to what I've said, I'd love to hear from you. Yes?
Are you finding, is there a certain style of home that tends to be less expensive to build? And are you finding the city to be more cooperative? And do they have a staff for inspectors and so on at this point?
In general, a traditional house is cheaper to build than a modern house or a contemporary house, in my experience. Because of the detailing, to build a modern house takes, it's a totally different culture. To build a traditional house, there's a little bit more margin for error in terms of the way the finishes coordinate with the structure. To build a modern house, there's zero margin for error, and the management and coordination of the trades through that construction cycle is much more intensive. As far as working with the city inspectors, in our experience, they're all pretty good. Being that we only work in the beach cities, we have a good deal of experience with the city staff, and they treat us fairly. I think the biggest challenge is that as codes change and requirements change, there's no outreach and there's no education on the part of the city. Manhattan Beach, a little bit. They try, they do coordinate meetings with the construction community, but it's up to us to stay on top of everything. And if an architect misses a new code requirement or a contractor misses a code requirement, we have to stumble through that learning curve, and sometimes in a client's mind that can result in a frustrating delay or a frustrating cost increase. So, if you're on top of it, it generally goes pretty smoothly once we get into that field inspection process. Yes?
Is there any construction cost differential if you're able to remodel
That's a really good question, and one that I'd like to talk more about tomorrow. The project I mentioned that took 10 months last year was a LEED Platinum house. It does have the certification. It was a case study by my client, who is also the architect, to see. The test was, can we build very sustainable, highly rated green construction for a comparable cost and time frame to typical market? And the answer is yes, you can do it. So for $300 a foot, you can build a LEED Platinum house. There are certain design considerations that you have to take into account there, but I can tell you more about that tomorrow or at any time in the future.
Any other questions today?
Yes.
I'm just curious, in determining your fee, do you use the percentage method or do you use a flat fee?
Both. In a perfect market,
I mean, one or the other, but
one or the other. In a perfect market, we use a cost plus basis. It's difficult to get a client to understand how, whether they have a $10,000 range or a $20,000 range, how that justifies an increase in fee on a contractor's basis. So there are caveats to the way the fees are constructed. Sometimes with a fixed fee, it gives a client a little bit more comfort to know that their costs can swing without what they might view as a penalty. But both are used and both are common in the current market. Okay, thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it.